Hello, everybody. Welcome to class. Now, you might be like, wait a minute. I know Mr. Wagstaff dresses snazzy every day, but is that dude wearing a tuxedo? Yes. All right, full disclosure, this is not actually a tuxedo, if you're ever, little fashion advice. So you can tell if a suit jacket is just a suit jacket or if it's a tuxedo. They are different. And here's how you tell. Oh, other hand. Right here, if the lapel goes down, that's just a regular suit jacket, which is what this is. If it goes up like this, that's a tuxedo. It's just a thing. I don't actually own a tuxedo because I'm a school teacher. And nothing I do in my entire life revolves around wearing a tuxedo, so I don't have one. But I'm going to pretend like I'm wearing a tuxedo if I want to. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Don't have a ton of stuff to talk about. All right. But we do need to talk about it because we're going to reference it pretty much for the rest of the semester. It has to do with governments and the way that they're designed. So with the revolutionary thinking that's been going on, if you're going to get rid of your monarch, if you're going to get rid of your king and all this other stuff, how are you going to do it differently then after that? Well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to implement a new type of government, all right? And generally speaking, everybody believes the new type of government that you come in with is utilitarianism, all right? So I'll explain it to you. So before I get back to that picture and distract you, I want to talk about this real quick before we go to that picture. Utilitarianism is the idea that the government's entire job should be to make life good for the largest amount of people possible. All right. The old style of government with having a king is everybody just served the king. Now, a utilitarian style government is a government needs to make as many people happy as possible. All right. There's a lot of different ways to try to implement that, and we're going to talk about it. But utilitarianism is the style of government that almost every revolution is going to encompass. They're going to have their own version of a government in which a very large amount of people are being treated well. All right. So utilitarianism. All right. So the definition is the best action is the one that leads to the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. So I saw this. I thought this is pretty interesting. If you're going with utilitarianism, all right. So here's how it can be morally questionable. All right. Not necessarily questionable, but if your main concept is to make life the best for the same amount of people, they're using Batman here. So Joker throws a woman into the ocean or whatever. All right. So Batman can either go save the woman or he can kill Joker. All right. You're like, of course, go save the woman. Why would you not? Because she's going to die if he doesn't go save her. Or if he goes and kills the Joker, then that means she died and the Joker's died. And Batman, who doesn't kill anybody because he's a good guy, all right, has actually just let two people die and it's his fault. All right. So utilitarianism, all right, because this is where it gets complicated with different versions of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism's idea would be maybe the best thing to do is kill the Joker. Because the Joker's always going to try to put people in danger. The Joker always kills people. So if Batman sacrifices this woman and kills the Joker, that's two people that have died. But then can the Joker kill anybody else? Maybe Joker would kill another 50 people in his life. He saved those 50 people. So in a utilitarian idea, what's the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Utilitarianism could say the best thing to do is take out the Joker, even though that means two people are going to die, but it's less than the total number if he just saves this woman today and lets the Joker hurt somebody else tomorrow. So while utilitarianism sounds super simple, like, hey, good for everybody, in reality, it becomes pretty complex. So while this is a super simple concept with comic books, creating a new style of government, which is great for everybody, doesn't mean that there's not going to be a lot of bloodshed when you switch over those style of governments. At least that's the idea of utilitarianism's ideas. So there are originally two new concepts. So America, we're going to be capitalist. That's just what America is, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. There are two different types of utilitarianism governments that we're going to talk about first. The first one is communism. All right. So communism isn't actually going to be put into play until the 1900s, but communism is the idea that every single person in a society is common. Everybody is mandated to be equal. In theory, they're like, there's no government because the people are all the same, so they run the government. They always have a government. It ends up being a dictator. But communism is the idea that everybody is absolutely equal, and by having all equal people, while you don't have any rich people, but you also don't have any super poor people. So communism is making everybody common in order to make sure. So you can't be unique. Uniqueness is looked down on. All right. So there is strict obedience to the government, strong censorship, opposition to the government is not allowed. There's almost no individual freedom. But the payoff to it is nobody's starving to death. That everybody has a job, everybody's doing something, everybody makes the exact same amount of money, and the idea is everybody is in like the lower middle class, to middle class. And that you're eliminating jealousy and class warfare because there should not be classes of any way, shape, or form in a communist society. This is very different from like the nobility and the feudalism stuff. Communism on paper is pretty enticing, and we'll talk about communism more when we see it in action in the 1900s and in the coming units, and why it typically inherently is not successful. All right, so the next one, all right, is socialism. Socialism and communism are extremely different. Extremely different. Communism is complete and total control of everything in society. There is no private property in communism. Socialism, all right, in theory, is the idea that the federal government controls stuff in society for the greater good of the population. Now, when you talk about communism, you know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, boom, here's communism, all right? When you're talking about socialism, there is so many different versions of socialism that it gets kind of obscure. Because people throw the term around now today, but when the socialism people talk about today is not the same socialism they're talking about here, really, because it's a big sliding scale. Socialism is basically the idea that the government controls private businesses for the greater good of society. So you can own things, you can be rich, but the federal government will control all aspects of production and means so that the greatest number of people get the greatest number of supplies and anything like that. So while communism does not allow any private property, you can have private property in a socialist society. Just the government can tell you what you can or can't do with that private property, right? Overly simplified, and every version of socialism is slightly different. Communism is pretty much communism. And where you put communism in place, that is going to be communist. Socialism, drastically different outcomes. It also gets weird, and we'll talk about it more, I guess, in the future. We'll talk about governmental entities. Communists believe they are socialist, but socialists do not believe that they are communists. Communists think it's socialist because you're helping out, the government's making it better for everybody. It gets different. A lot of crazy governments have called themselves socialist over time that are not in any way socialist. Like, if you're a communist government, you're clearly not socialist. The Nazi Party called themselves socialist, clearly not socialist. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Most governments like to claim, when they get crazy, like to claim that they're socialist. And if nothing else, it just ruins this concept of socialism. But again, the socialism concept is vastly different from each country that would claim that they're socialist. Like, England today would probably claim that they are socialist. And you're like, what? You mean? But then there's also like North Korea probably also says that they are socialist. So England and North Korea could not be more different today, but they both claim that they are socialists. So when you call somebody socialist, it doesn't really mean anything because the definition is so broad that you have to really interpret what you mean by socialist. Communism is communism. Socialism is socialism. The big difference, communism, no private property. Socialism, you can have private property, but the government tells you exactly what you can or can't do with it. It's the most simple as I can make that. So the question here is, even though socialism and communism are both very different, how are they both good examples of utilitarianism? The reason they're both good examples is because utilitarianism just means that the government is looking out for the most amount of people it can. Communism is the idea that if everybody's the same, then it benefits the greatest number of people. Socialism is the idea that they're going to control private property to help the greatest number of people. Both communist and socialism both want to help the most amount of people as possible, and that is a utilitarianism government. All right, don't worry about that picture. It's talking about Adam Smith, and it's going to kind of throw you off. All right, so new ways of thinking in America. All right, so in America, it's going to be a little different. We go, and we're really one of the first countries to commit to this. There are downsides to our society, but there's also, because of our society, is why we are so dominant as well. So there's this dude named Adam Smith. All right, Adam Smith. He talks about a market economy. This is what America has committed to. He talks about the invisible hand of the market economy. He says that the government, unlike communist or socialist, should have almost no involvement in private affairs. Just government's there to protect us in case we get invaded. The government there is to tax and give us basic general resources. But the vast majority of stuff should just be left alone. And that's called Laissez Faire economics, which basically just allows businesses to do whatever they want. There's no government control. The government doesn't own it like a communist country. The government doesn't control it like a socialist government. Just let it happen. This is that concept of just letting the market decide is capitalism. Meaning, hey, if you had a toilet paper company right now, you're probably making pretty good money. All right. So right now, if you had a toilet paper company, would you make more or less toilet paper? You would make more because everybody's trying to buy it right now because everybody's freaking out over this respiratory disease and they need toilet paper. Don't understand that, but I think I've shown my ignorance on this whole subject for the last couple of weeks. So we're just gonna go with it. But you would make more because you make more money on it. Companies want to make money. All right. That's what motivates people to be rich. So you basically sell what you want for however much you want, but you want people to buy it. So if you make it too expensive, people won't buy it. So you bring down your own price. The free market is what America does, which is what capitalism is, where there's like no government involvement and just let things happen. All right. Adam Smith talked about this in his Wealth of Nations, and that is how it works. Here's a little picture. So laissez-faire economy, all right, which is what America, in theory, is, where the government doesn't get super involved in it. What to produce, determined by consumers' preferences, whatever you want to produce. So people want toilet paper right now. If you can make toilet paper, you're going to make money. How to produce, determined by the producer seeking profits. For whom to produce, determined by purchasing power. This is all like the market. A command economy, which is like socialism and communism, you're basically, the government just decides all that. This, in America, is much more fluid. So here's the pros and cons of this in American society. The pros are you can get crazy rich in America. It's the American dream. You work hard enough in a command economy, the government ain't standing in your way. You can go you can be Bill Gates. You can go be Mark Zuckerberg. You can be crazy rich. The downside to this, you can also be dirt poor in America. You can be in the richest country on earth and be starving to death. And everybody knows it, and everybody's just cool with it. This is one of the big reasons why like communist countries look at America as evil is because how in the world can you just let people starve to death in your country when you're super rich? But America's mentality is you got to take the good with the bad. You have the right to be rich in America. You have as much as you want to be able to do, you should be able to do. Whether how well that works in practice is subjective, but that is the idea. And so America is going to, when the American Revolution is going to commit to a laissez-faire economy where the government's hands off. A lot of other countries over time will go to a more command economy like socialism or communism. So yeah, this is like the pros and cons of capitalism. Pros is you can have a whole bunch of stuff. The cons is, and this is a big issue. If the government completely stays out of it, it doesn't really. Companies don't generally care about the environment. It's about, since the main thing in a economy is making money. If you can make more money and put people at risk, companies will do that because it's all about money. This is where we've seen over the last 100 years in America, even though we are a laissez-faire economy, the government does get involved because while we understand that money is a motivating factor for everybody, you can't do it at the expense of the health of other people. You can't make dangerous products, even if people are willing to buy them. So America has stepped away from the laissez-faire somewhat, but still drastically different than socialism, where the core idea of it is where the government controls private industry, or communism, where there is no private industry and the government owns every bit of it. All right. So number 5, how do the concepts of capitalism and laissez-faire economic policies work well together? The way they work well together is that capitalism, all right, is motivated by money. All right. The people who make good money are the ones who are successful. Laissez-faire works well with that because the government doesn't step in and stop people from making money in a capitalist society. That the government just lets a society and corporations do whatever they need to make money, because the idea that there is a invisible hand, based on what Adam Smith, his idea is Wealth of Nations, that there's this invisible hand that motivates society, is what should regulate prices. So they work well together because in a capitalist society, you need to make money and you don't want the government keeping you from making money. And that's why capitalism and laissez-faire go hand in hand together. It would be really hard to be successful in a country in which in a capitalist country in which a government controlled what you did and didn't do as a company. Now, I also want to say before we finish here today, and before I send you on to watch your video clip, the socialism that's being talked about now in American politics is not this socialism. I know Bernie Sanders talks a lot about, so he literally calls it democratic socialism. It is different. So what we're talking about here is the classic version of socialism that came out from the 1700s on. In no way is a comment on the current political environment. I feel like since I'm recording myself here talking about hot button issues, I need to clarify that this is in no way a comment on any of the current political states of the United States. All right. With that being said, you guys go on to part 3 of your notes, watch the video and answer the viewing guide.